I've been blind in my right eye since birth. This deprives me of the experience of perspective. It's this problem of sight that's made me establish a link with geometric painting. And that's probably why I started painting flat shapes. Everything that has a pointed shape immediately repels me because I get the feeling it's going to poke into my eye. If I happen to see a fence with iron grills and pointed ends, I'd turn around and leave because I cannot stand it. In sculpture, as I can only see with one eye, I can distinguish neither perspective nor dimensions, nor the distance between objects. This makes me see everything flat, without relief. Only with light, which is essential in my work, am I able to make these distinctions. My parents didn't realize for a long time that I couldn't see. I remember my mother like a fading dream, seeing her coming into my room to kiss me goodnight and to see if I was wrapped up warm. I used to pretend to be asleep so I could watch her. My mother was a very sensitive person and a very charming woman. She died when she was 67. At the time, I was 34 and living in Paris. When my mother died, I lost my most precious possession. The one person I could always count on. The maternal lap to run to. My only real protection from the outside world had gone. I remembered for a long time that maternal smell, the unmistakable and unique smell of motherhood. When I was a child, I was very ill with measles. Perhaps that's why I grew up so weak. I've often thought that my father, a lovely but dull man, must have been disappointed in me. I was a dreamer, a sickly child. I can't blame him. Who wouldn't want a healthy, vivacious and happy child? My parents used to send me outside to play with the other children, but I preferred to stay in my father's small toy factory and watch the people working. I used to stare, transfixed at the mystery of how cardboard paste could turn into a beautiful doll. It was wonderful to see how the color marked the eyes, the lips, the cheeks. My father used to get very angry with me because I spent long hours in the factory, building theater sets, different gadgets, artifacts, and basic movie cameras, or building kites. I have always loved kites, reeling out the thread and seeing how they rise in the sky. All I wanted when I was at the factory was for the workers to make those virgin dolls for me. I mean, dolls dressed like the Holy Virgin, with long gowns and capes with stars. When nobody was watching, I used to kneel down in front of those childish images and pray, I want to be a painter. I want to be a painter. I started scribbling at nursery school in O'Neill, and they used to say to me, you're going to be a painter. I have always painted since I was a child. Even at a very early age, I could feel the obsession of painting. Plastic art has been very important throughout my life. It has shaped my vision of things, and my entire world has been defined by it. I've expressed myself through plastic art since childhood. My parents, partly joking, used to say, Eusebio's going to be a painter. Out of all my childhood memories, I remember most an irresistible urge to paint. During the Civil War, very early in the morning, before the workers who used to build Russian planes in the toy factory started to work, my friends and I went out into the road to find dead bodies. We always found someone who'd been killed the night before, lying in the gutter. On his breast, dried blood, large stains surrounding the wound. We lowered our voices to a whisper as though the dead could hear us. We remained there, staring at the open eyes and the pathetic gesture of the hands. I don't know why we did that. The day after the Civil War ended, I was then 15 or 17, some men in blue shirts and red berets pointed a gun at my father and demanded the deeds of our house. They continually asked for money that my father didn't have. After the war, life in O'Neill was like hell for my father. They took everything we had and we were left in the streets. That was when my father decided to move to Valencia. In Valencia, I starved for a long time. Valencia brings back very sad memories for me. My starvation was also spiritual. The atmosphere in the Bellas Artes School of Valencia was terrible. The teachers were foolish and old-fashioned. They thought their world was the best, and you had to see it their way at any cost. They made you paint in a certain way, following their style. The Soroyismo was in vogue in Valencia at that time, and each teacher forced us to paint as Sorolla did. But as always, when one is young and one is forced to do something, one fights against it strongly. That was how all the students became anti-Soroyistas. At the School of Bellas Artes around that time, some small postcards were being circulated of Van Gogh, Gauguin, and other Impressionists. The teachers hated to see us with them because they thought it was poison. During that period, many of us looked up to the French Impressionists. I remember Father Alfonso Roge with special love. He was a priest from Valencia who was a teacher at the School of Bellas Artes. Even though he taught us theology, he always used to talk to us about painting instead of religion. He was the first person to show me the works of Kandinsky. He spoke passionately of Matisse and Van Gogh. The other teachers used to say he was going to spoil our taste. If I had met him before, I would have known modern art sooner. I went to Paris with a very small grant, 3,000 pesetas. That didn't last long. These were years of real bewilderment in a large metropolis where there was everything that I dreamed of, art and everything I could hope for. To leave the school of Bellas Artes of Valencia and to go to Paris is something that would make an impression on anybody. To suddenly discover movements like Cubism, Impressionism, and Puntillism, considering the bad training I'd had at the School of Art, was very difficult for me. The major problem for a Spanish artist arriving in Paris, or so it seemed to me, was how to understand the meaning of modern art. This was really difficult for a student from the School of Bellas Artes to suddenly discover an undefined world and to try to take in all of the information, all of the movements. It was overwhelming. I was in Paris for 10 years, from 1949 to 1959. I ran out of money almost immediately, and I had to work selling newspapers. Well, all those jobs that are available to students. Cali was my first discovery. Afterwards, it was Mondrian. But it wasn't until 1953, when I studied Kandinsky's work, that I discovered my true vocation. Changing from representational art to abstract art was terrible for me. I used to cry at night. I don't want to sound dramatic, I just want to explain. It was the end of my previous painting life, like a sad goodbye. It was for me like parting from this world. Why did I choose geometric forms? It's still a mystery to me. Although I've been influenced by Mondigliani, Braque, Matisse, perhaps they seemed unreachable to me. Or perhaps I was condemned to start from scratch, to create a new style, my own style. I didn't paint often, and when I did, it was at nights, when I came back from work. A strong discipline is needed to do such different work when you're physically exhausted. I used to come into my bedroom, put a large wooden board on my table, and then start to paint. My friends used to say I was crazy, that all I painted was cheese triangles. At that time, I used to paint fragments of circumferences, always on the board. It was not a question of money, of not being able to buy an easel. I just painted on a board. I cannot truthfully say that in those years I was a painter. I used to paint small things, small studies. Gouache is easier to use in a horizontal position, and even then it's still difficult to use in my style, where the line has a very defined limit and is carefully drawn. It took me a while to find the correct size. At the beginning, I tried to do large works that were very difficult to control physically. Afterwards, I made them smaller. I'm not sure what I was doing. It's funny, but I can't explain why I started painting like that. It's like when a child learns to write, without knowing what he's writing or what he's going to write next, without knowing the meaning. It was a form of discipline that I forced upon myself, trying to take on something that was then unknown to me, that had yet to come. I had the feeling that I was getting ready for something about to happen, as if I was waiting for a different life to begin. It was as though, by ignoring what I was painting, I was getting ready to take a big step in my life. A big jump between the traditional line, the academic, and the new abstract movements. Two completely opposite worlds, at least at the beginning. That's what those small gauches were. In January 1960, I came back to Spain, to Madrid, with Abel Martin. I wanted a change of air, of places, and I needed a break from the busy life of Paris. It must have been in 1958 when I first met Abel. My loyal friend Abel, the perfect person to live with, the perfect companion. When I became frustrated with my painting, I would scream that I wanted to kill myself. He would ask me calmly, "What for?" We lived in a hostel for a while, and then we moved to a flat that had no chairs nor even a bed. It was just like living in Paris. We were able to eat because we made prints for our painter friends. I started to include in my subjects figurative allusions, such as horizontal lines to depict the horizon of a landscape, or circles to imitate the sun or moon. Broken lines pointing upwards represented plants. I used to cover the surface of my paintings with colored lines, grading the color to represent nature. To make it clearer, I used blue colors at the top part and greens, maroons, and grays for the bottom part. The town of Cuenca had a great influence on me. During my trips with Fernando Thobel, when we were setting up the Spanish Museum of Abstract Art, we had the chance to study the Castilian scenery, which afterwards had a major influence on my work. Apart from landscapes, music also inspires me. When I was in Paris, someone lent me a record player. I only had 2 records, one of Prokofiev and the other one was Vivaldi's The Four Seasons. I believe that I have expressed that music in my paintings. Many things have influenced my work. The Arabic world is an extraordinary attraction for me. If I could, I would spend all my time at the Alhambra. Cordoba fascinates me. I also like Avila very much. I went to some villages in the Pyrenees, and that was an unforgettable experience. I was astounded by the beauty of Italy, Switzerland, Paris, Egypt, Constantinople, and Greece. I cannot tell. So much has influenced my painting. Poetry is another example. Perhaps my village. I've always liked O'Neill. People there are kind and modest. And why not also Alicante? The Mediterranean Sea, where the waves come in slowly as if they were strolling. The sea is green and blue with the sunlight, and at night it's dark and beautiful on the shore. When the Museum of the Azagorada was opened in Alicante, I donated a large amount of my work. I felt like part of me had died. But I couldn't fit everything at home, so why not give it to Alicante for thousands of people to see and enjoy it? It was my resurrection. I think it's ridiculous to have to go to Madrid or Barcelona to see ultramodern art. The museum in Alicante has a collection which shows one person's individual taste, the one who bought the paintings. But it's a valid show because it's a really varied collection. The day the van came to my house to collect my paintings, I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was witnessing the funeral of a son. I have always loved Alicante. I wanted to do a portfolio dedicated to it, but I didn't want to do the typical things like the sea, the sky, or the mountains. Then I had the idea of doing a group of paintings based on the writings of Gabriel Miró, a famous writer from Alicante. His prose has some of the most beautiful descriptions of Alicante that I've ever heard. I think they're the best group of paintings I've ever done. When I read San Juan de la Cruz, I went through a mystic period in my own way. I've always liked The Spiritual Song by San Juan de la Cruz. This was the last thing I illustrated before I had to stop painting. In 1 year, I went from using a cane to crutches, later the wheelchair. Not knowing whether I was going to be able to paint again made me very sad. The dealers find out very quickly that you're ill and they come to buy everything that you have. Well, this happens when you're going to die. So it is to one's advantage to spread rumors of one's own death, and then the price goes up. It seems like a bad joke, but it's the truth.
The jury of the Prince of Asturias Foundation, having met in Oviedo to award the 1983 Prize for the Arts, declares the following. In recognition of his innovation, his discovery of new ways of expression, his dedication to perfection, and the diffusion of his works, also to recognize his profound contribution to modern art, the jury of the Prince of Asturias Foundation awards the 1993 Prize for the Arts to Mr. Sempere Juan.